I blamed me, and then I felt really sad that humans can be that way. And then my heart went into I don't deserve love.
I blame myself and feel deeply saddened when I think about how people can treat each other this way. At that moment, my heart couldn't feel that I deserved to be loved. These words did not come from a failure, but from Cesar Millan, a man who became globally renowned with the nickname the Dog Whisperer. With his calm demeanor, sharp gaze, and exceptional ability to train even the most unruly dogs, Cesar became an international icon in the pet training industry. His television show on National Geographic captivated millions of viewers, propelling him to the peak of fame for nearly a decade. However, behind his composed exterior was a man struggling with deep emotional wounds, battling depression, addiction, and negative thoughts. So what pushed Cesar Millan, a person who once inspired the world with his teachings on balance and positive energy, to the brink of self-destruction? Why could a man who helped millions of families restore peace in their homes not save his own? The answers will be revealed in today's video. 1. The boy from Sinaloa. To understand why someone like him could fall into such deep despair, we need to look back and explore the beginning of the story. The journey from a poor boy in Mexico to becoming the famous dog whisperer, known worldwide, is the starting point for an inevitable tragedy that would unfold later. Cesar Millan was born and raised in Sinaloa, a region fraught with instability where violence, crime, and poverty are not rare occurrences but part of daily life. He did not have a peaceful childhood, nor did he have the smooth beginnings that many others experience. However, it was within these challenges and hardships that a strong belief was born in him, that people can live better lives, that dreams do not need to ask for permission from reality to come true. And it was this dream that pushed him to cross borders, with only 100 USD in his pocket, no place to turn to, no relatives, no knowledge of the language, and no legal documents. The only thing he had was his extraordinary ability to connect with dogs. I had my first bath in America in a dog's bathtub. That sentence was both humorous and heart-wrenching. Cesar recalls that during his early days of homelessness in Los Angeles, he worked at a pet grooming shop. When the women there learned that he had no place to sleep, they offered him shelter right in the shop. Life at that time was a blend of hardship and kindness, of dreams and a harsh reality. But what made Cesar different was not the circumstances, but how he faced them. He didn't see it as suffering, but rather viewed life through the eyes of an optimistic wanderer. Living on the streets isn't hard. I'm just a 21-year-old guy with a dream. That statement was not just a fleeting optimism, but the spirit that carried him throughout his life. Cesar believed that he had an advantage over those born in America simply because he had survived in Sinaloa, a place where surviving into adulthood meant you had already succeeded. Any place in America is 1,000 times safer. When you feel safe, everything around you seems more joyful, he shared. In this contrast, Cesar saw life as a gift, even though its exterior may have been old, worn, or dusty. There's something strange. Those who have endured the most suffering often learn to appreciate the smallest things. Cesar is a living testament to this. He did not demand life to be fair. He only needed to live true to his essence, a person who can understand what animals cannot express in words. He cared for, talked to, and understood the unspoken language of dogs as if they were another part of himself. And eventually this difference could no longer be hidden. Hollywood took notice. It started with private clients, and soon after famous stars turned to him as a savior for their out-of-control pets. Cesar didn't just train dogs, he trained people, teaching them how to adjust their energy, establish roles, and create a pack where humans are the leaders and pets are respected members. Thanks to his philosophy of calm, assertive energy, he helped many modern individuals regain balance in their relationships with the world around them. The show The Dog Whisperer on National Geographic quickly became a phenomenon. It wasn't just a pet training program, it was a lesson on calmness, connection, and above all, trust. Millions of viewers tuned in each week. Cesar built a strong media empire with books, courses, videos, and tours, all conveying the message of controlling one's energy to rebuild the environment. At the peak of his career, he became a modern-day teacher, imparting a lesson that seemed simple but was invaluable in a world full of chaos: how to be calm and strong at the same time. However, right at the height of the spotlight, cracks began to appear, like the sunlight streaming through a window. It can be brilliant at times, but strong enough to burn what's inside. At that point, Cesar Millan seemed to have it all. But perhaps he had lost the most important thing: his connection with himself. 2. The devastating betrayal. Starting as an undocumented immigrant with a very difficult background, he managed to rise to become a globally recognized figure with a massive fan base and a series of successful media products. Moreover, he is the founder of a renowned dog training center in Los Angeles. However, the period from 2010 to 2012 was one of the most challenging times in Cesar's life, as the personal and professional foundations he had carefully built suddenly began to crack severely. These events did not happen in isolation, but coincided and influenced each other, pushing him into a full-blown crisis. The first setback came with his divorce from his longtime wife, Cesar Millan. The two had married in 1994 and had 2 sons, Andre and Calvin. During the early years of his career, Cesar was not only his life partner, but also a key supporter behind the scenes, managing business affairs and taking care of the family so that Cesar could focus on his expertise and personal brand development. In 2010, Cesar filed for divorce in the Los Angeles Superior Court. Public documents showed that she requested custody of the children, child support, and financial assistance after the divorce. The divorce was not just an emotional matter, but also led to many complex legal and financial disputes. Although Cesar did not publicly share the true reasons for the breakdown, the impact of this event became clear in the years that followed. The divorce was not just a personal split, but also forced him to confront the breakdown of a value he had always cherished in his training: philosophy, stability, connection, and leadership within the family. Notably, while Cesar had helped thousands of families restore harmony between humans and pets, he himself was unable to maintain harmony within his own family. This event marked the beginning of the next series of crises, when he no longer had the emotional support he once had. Next, the second breakdown came from business disputes and brand ownership issues, when Cesar discovered that he was gradually losing control of the empire he had built. Throughout his career, Cesar had partnered with many media partners, producers, lawyers, and business advisors. However, due to a lack of experience with complex legal agreements and often relying on verbal contracts, he found himself in a passive position when it came to protecting the intellectual property rights associated with his brand, the Dog Whisperer, and its associated products, specifically the Dog Whisperer brand. The television show that made his name famous was not entirely owned by him, but by the production company and several other individuals. In some agreements, even the rights to use the name Cesar Millan for commercial purposes were tied to terms he could not control. He later shared in an interview, "I thought I owned 50% of the rights, but when everything happened, I realized that nothing was in writing. I always kept my promises, but they didn't." Vang. This reflects a major weakness of Cesar. During that time, he was so focused on his expertise and building his personal brand that he neglected legal and business matters. When conflicts of interest arose, he not only suffered financially, but also almost lost control of the products tied to his name. Being legally bound made it difficult for him to continue developing his personal brand in the way he had originally envisioned. This was a major shock, not only because of the material loss, but also because of the betrayal from people he had once trusted. Cesar described this feeling as follows: "They didn't just want this, they also wanted that, and that wasn't theirs." He explained that people who had worked with him, even those who knew his family and his children, chose to act based on their own interests and legal strategies rather than professional ethics and trust. He called this the legal way to be dishonest in the Hollywood world. Brand ownership disputes in the entertainment industry are not uncommon, but in Cesar's case, The issue became even more serious because he had tied his personal image to his training philosophy, a model where honesty and integrity are core principles. When the brand was taken away from him, his trust in himself was shaken. This was further exacerbated when it occurred simultaneously with the breakdown of his marriage. In addition, losing control of the brand made it difficult for Cesar to sign new contracts, negotiate licensing rights, and carry out personal projects. For a long time, he was unable to use the name The Dog Whisperer for his products and services, causing his business activities to stagnate. Finally, the consequences of these two major setbacks, the divorce and brand ownership disputes, took a toll on his mental and physical health. Cesar fell into a deep depression, feeling lost, doubting himself, and losing faith in the values he had spent his life building. Whereas in the years before he had been the embodiment of balance, control, and stability, everything now seemed out of reach. The collapse did not happen because of a single event, but because too many important elements were lost at once. Family, work partners, and public image all were disrupted in a short period, creating a perfect storm that Cesar could not withstand. The consequences of this period would continue to unfold in the years that followed, as he faced psychological crises, declining health, and fractured family relationships. 3. The darkest moment. After a series of events between 2010 and 2012, Cesar Millan entered what he personally described as the darkest period of his life. Two major turning points: the divorce from his ex-wife and the loss of control over the Dog Whisperer brand not only caused him significant financial and legal damage, but also triggered a deep psychological crisis that lasted for years. This was a time marked by a severe breakdown in his mental and physical health, as well as his personal relationships. It was a staggering fall for a man once seen globally as a symbol of balance and control in life energy. In later interviews, Cesar revealed that his initial emotions were self-blame and guilt. Rather than blaming others or external circumstances, he saw himself as the root cause of the collapse. This mindset quickly led him to feel undeserving of love or respect, a clear symptom of major depression. He once said, "I wasn't angry at anyone else. I was angry at myself." It made me really sad to realize that human beings could behave that way, and my heart told me I didn't deserve to be loved. These emotions weren't just fleeting reactions, they unfolded as a prolonged sequence, gradually building up and dragging Cesar deeper into a spiral of negative thinking. According to psychologists, people who are deeply introspective and guided by strong moral beliefs are often more vulnerable when those values are betrayed. For Cesar, core principles such as honesty, loyalty, and honor were fundamental to his identity. When those were violated, he lost the emotional foundation that helped him maintain inner balance. The consequences soon manifested in his physical health. His weight plummeted, dropping to around 46 kilograms. He began using high doses of painkillers, especially Vicodin, a highly addictive medication typically prescribed for acute post-surgical pain. According to Cesar, he was taking up to 12 pills a day, washing them down with vodka and Red Bull to stay energized and mentally functional enough to keep working. It's important to emphasize that abusing Vicodin in combination with alcohol is extremely dangerous, potentially causing serious liver damage, respiratory failure, drug addiction, and neurological disorders. Taking such high doses over an extended period put Cesar's health in grave jeopardy. This was not merely a phase of sadness, it was a systematic cycle of self-destruction, one in which he was both the victim and the perpetrator. At the same time, he began experiencing suicidal thoughts. In one interview, Cesar admitted that at one point he had actively planned to end his life. His thoughts evolved from feelings of hopelessness to self-loathing, and finally to the urge to act. If I can't hurt them, I'll hurt myself. If I can't kill them, then I'll kill myself. According to Cesar, these thoughts were partly influenced by the cultural environment in which he was raised. Sinaloa, Mexico, where violence and revenge were once part of the survival code. In that context, betrayal was considered unforgivable and was often answered with blood. Although he never followed through on these extreme thoughts, the cultural legacy haunted him and shaped how he reacted to emotional wounds. Alongside the psychological and physical challenges, his relationship with his children also began to deteriorate significantly. After the divorce, his two sons lived with their mother, and as his internal crisis dragged on, Cesar gradually lost contact with them for nearly 3 years, especially with his youngest daughter from another relationship. That daughter later described that period as living with a father and not knowing who you'd wake up to the next day. She said he had erratic mood swings, inconsistent energy levels, and unpredictable behavior, similar to the behaviorally disturbed dogs he once taught others to manage easily, irritable, emotionally unresponsive, and out of control. What's striking is that the very skills Cesar had taught others to use in managing their pets' behavior no longer worked on himself. Foundational principles of his career, like calm, assertive energy, positive mindset, and setting boundaries, were no longer enough to rescue him from his own unraveling. 4. Broken family connections. The collapse of Cesar Millan's personal life and career not only left him reeling, but also had profound consequences for those he cherished most, especially his children. During the period when Cesar faced severe psychological and physical turmoil, his relationship with his children was nearly severed for 3 consecutive years. His 2 sons, Andre and Calvin, resided with their mother following the divorce. As Cesar grappled with depression, substance abuse, and professional upheavals, he gradually lost the ability to maintain a consistent presence in his children's lives. Phone calls became infrequent, and meetings grew scarce. Though he remained their father in name, emotionally, his absence created an ever-widening chasm between him and his sons. The concern extended beyond mere physical distance. It was the emotional and psychological disconnect that was most alarming. Previously, Cesar had been the embodiment of a strong, steadfast father who could handle any situation. However, as he began to lose emotional control, becoming erratic and negative, that image started to fade in his children's eyes. Particularly affected was his youngest daughter, born from a prior relationship, who suffered the most psychologically during this time. She later described living in a state of constant high alert, a condition known in psychology as hypervigilance, often experienced by individuals who have undergone trauma. She recounted that whenever she was near her father, she constantly tried to predict which version of him she would encounter that day. The affectionate dad who once took her to the park, or the silent, angry, and unstable man. She developed a habit of observing every subtle facial expression and tone change in his voice to anticipate his mood and adjust her behavior accordingly. This prolonged state made her feel unsafe even within her own home, a place that should have been a sanctuary for a child. The heartbreaking irony was that Cesar, who had taught millions how to read the energy of pets, failed to recognize that his own energy was instilling fear in his daughter. On a deeper level, the emotional roles between father and child were reversed. Typically, children look to their parents for stability. In this case, the daughter became the one who had to observe and adapt to survive the adult's instability. This role reversal led to long-term emotional damage and affected her personality development. Furthermore, as Cesar sank into a negative psychological state, he became increasingly passive in maintaining family connections, partly due to guilt, believing he had hurt his children and was unworthy of their love, and partly because he lacked the mental energy to sustain relationships. As self-blame, substance dependence, and depression took over, personal connections were pushed aside. With his sons, the bond wasn't entirely broken, but became cold and distant. Cesar rarely attended important events and was no longer a regular part of everyday moments. What was once a strong emotional foundation between father and sons became a relationship that existed more on paper than in reality. The fact that his children didn't speak to him for 3 years wasn't merely an act of anger. It was the result of a long chain of unresolved negative emotions: hurt, fear, disappointment, and feelings of abandonment. Family therapy experts have noted that when a child stops connecting with a parent, it's not because they don't need affection, but because they've lost faith that the relationship can provide safety or emotional fulfillment. Notably, Cesar's children didn't publicly criticize him, indicating they still held a positive image of him from the past. However, this also reflected that the rift in their relationship was too deep to mend without genuine healing from both sides. Cesar himself admitted in various interviews that the most painful aspect of his crisis was the fractured relationship with his children. He realized he had been so focused on healing others that he failed to see that those who needed him most, his own children, were drifting away. This awakening didn't happen immediately, but began when he entered therapy at Cirque Lodge in 2012. There, through individual and group counseling sessions, he started to understand that to reconnect with others, he first had to reconnect with himself. When the mind is in chaos, maintaining a healthy relationship with a partner, friends, or children is impossible. After grasping the importance of emotional connection, Cesar began to reach out to his children. However, because the wounds had been festering for so long, this journey was far from easy and required time, patience, and genuine commitment. Rebuilding a broken relationship couldn't rely solely on apologies. It demanded real behavioral changes, consistent presence, and a true sense of responsibility. 5. The healing journey. By 2012, Cesar Millan's physical and mental health had reached a critical point. His body had become severely debilitated after a prolonged period of dependence on painkillers, stimulants, and alcohol. Psychologically, he continued to sink deeper into severe depression, feeling lost and nearly completely disconnected from his close relationships. All efforts to maintain his public image had become ineffective, as internally he was grappling with unresolved turmoil. In that context, Cesar voluntarily entered Cirque Lodge, a high-end rehabilitation and recovery center located in Utah. This facility is among the most renowned and expensive treatment centers in the United States, having hosted numerous celebrities from the entertainment industry. The treatment cost there reaches up to $150,000 per month, encompassing medical services, psychological and physical therapy, nutritional guidance, and spiritual reconnection activities such as meditation, group therapy, and nature therapy. However, for Cesar, entering Cirque Lodge was not merely an act of rehabilitation. It marked a turning point to restructure his entire being. In reality, he had never been just a behavioral addict. What he needed to overcome was a deeper crisis concerning his identity, personal values, and life's meaning. He shared, "When faced with a true challenge, you either get crushed or become sharper." This wasn't just a generic philosophical statement. For Cesar, it was a life or death choice. Either be completely destroyed by what had been lost, or find a reason to exist amidst the ruins. One of the first things the therapeutic team at Cirque asked him to do was to set aside his role as an expert and return to being a learner, relearning how to live, how to confront genuine emotions, and how to express vulnerability without assuming he always had to be strong. This was not easy for Cesar, who was accustomed to control leadership and teaching. Yet this openness was the initial step for him to embark on a true healing process. Throughout the treatment period, Cesar began to apply the very principles he had taught others to his own recovery journey. One of the core philosophies he always emphasized when training dogs was, "Your energy must be stable before you expect stable behavior from another creature." When applied to humans, this means that to mend relationships, one must first heal oneself. He started rebuilding from within rather than attempting to control the external world as he had before. This involved seemingly simple yet fundamental actions: eating regularly, getting sufficient sleep, engaging in light physical exercise, participating in morning meditation, journaling, and most importantly, speaking honestly about his feelings during therapy sessions. Gradually, he regained a sense of calm that had previously only been maintained superficially. Now, it emanated from deep within. His cravings for substances diminished, his sleep improved, and notably his confidence returned in a humble manner, not the arrogance of a celebrity, but a self-awareness filled with mindfulness. One of the most significant moments of this journey occurred on November 12, 2015, when his youngest daughter called him after nearly 3 years of no contact. Notably, at that time, she had just completed her own treatment program for issues related to eating disorders and substance addiction, a path similar to her father's. The brief conversation held profound meaning. It was the first sign of acceptance, not immediate forgiveness, but an invitation to heal together. From that point, Cesar and his daughter embarked on an 18-month family therapy journey, guided by a professional. The therapy sessions were not just for talking, but also for listening to the other's pain. Something Cesar had never truly done with his daughter before. He was compelled to confront the truth that despite having endured significant suffering himself, it did not absolve him of the responsibility for the pain he had caused others, especially those closest to him. These therapy sessions were challenging, but essential steps to rebuild trust and a sense of safety between father and daughter. A highlight of the reconciliation process was a special trip in 2017 to a meditation retreat in Arizona. There they spent a week in a tranquil environment, engaging in activities like meditation, nature walks, writing letters to each other, and participating in interactive therapy exercises. This was not a vacation, but a spiritual journey, providing both of them the opportunity to reflect on the past without judgment and to re-establish their relationship on a new foundation, honest, clear, and free from imposition. During this period, Cesar also began to rewrite his pet training philosophies to align more closely with human development. He realized that each principle applied to animals, from calmness setting boundaries, rewarding to consistency, could become life principles for humans, if adjusted and applied with compassion. He shared in a later article, "When I teach people how to guide their pets, I always say you can't help them stabilize if you're not stable yourself. Later I realized that this also applies to family relationships. I wasn't stable, so I made others feel unsafe." Since then, he has become more cautious in expressing emotions, no longer maintaining the image of being always okay. As before, vulnerability is no longer seen as a weakness, but as a necessary part of creating genuine connections. Instead of striving to be a hero, he chooses to be a father who acknowledges his mistakes, knows how to apologize, and is willing to relearn how to love in a mindful way. Cesar's healing journey did not conclude in a single moment, nor did it stem from a singular action. It was a long series of small, continuous, and persistent decisions to gradually rebuild himself, not just for his own sake, but for those he loves. From the treatment center in Utah to the meditation retreat in Arizona, from solitary journal entries to tearful conversations, from physical detoxification to acknowledging mistakes in relationships, all have become the foundation for a new version of Cesar Millan. Strong, not because he lacks wounds, but because he dared to confront them and chose to heal. 6. The quiet support. When the public learned about the serious crisis Cesar Millan had gone through, the world, especially those who had followed him for nearly a decade, through the dog whisperer, was shocked, moved, and offered their wholehearted support. To many, Cesar was more than just a dog trainer. He was seen as a symbol of calm strength and a unique ability to connect beyond language barriers. Knowing that even he had faced deep inner struggles made people realize a relatable truth. Every one of us can stumble, and every one of us can rise again stronger. The moment the special interview featuring Cesar's first revelations about that dark time was released, thousands of fans around the globe sent him messages, emails, handwritten letters, and comments to show their encouragement. These weren't just simple words of support. They reflected the profound impact he had on countless individuals' lives. On online forums, social media, and even in handwritten letters sent to Cesar's training center, story after story poured in. Many came not only from pet owners, but also from those quietly battling emotional struggles of their own. They felt empowered, knowing that someone like Cesar had once fallen into the abyss and found his way back. Some even stated that Cesar Millan had completely changed their lives, not only through his lessons on animal training, but through the way he helped them reflect and better understand themselves. One woman once shared, "I used to be terrified of dogs because I was chased and bitten as a child. But after watching Cesar's show, I began to understand why they behave that way. I realized I was looking at them with fear, and that was exactly what they were reacting to. I decided to change how I approach them. Now I have 2 dogs, a Rottweiler and a Bulldog, and I love them, like they're my own children. Many others expressed that thanks to Cesar, they came to understand for the first time that caring for an animal also requires emotional maturity from the human. His quote, "You can't change a dog's behavior without changing your own energy," first became a life principle that influenced how they treated their families, their jobs, and even themselves. Several influential pet training organizations around the world also spoke out in praise, expressing admiration for Cesar's bravery in sharing the most deeply personal wounds of his life. The public response gave Cesar not only a sense of being loved, but also became a crucial factor in his recovery from crisis. In many conversations afterward, he openly admitted that the connection he felt from the fan community helped him overcome the guilt, shame, and isolation that had weighed on him for so long. He once confided, "I used to believe that if I failed, people would turn their backs on me. But what the audience showed me made me realize this. When you dare to face and be honest about your own pain, you don't lose respect. You gain even more love." From that point on, Cesar began to change the way he communicated with his audience. Rather than always portraying the image of a controlled pack leader, he chose to be more open, sharing lessons, mistakes, wounds, and even the things he was still working to heal. This didn't weaken his image. On the contrary, it created a deeper bond between him and his followers. At later seminars, he spoke candidly about his struggle with the painkiller Vicodin, his depression, and the thoughts that he didn't deserve to go on living. His words were never self-pitying. They were honest, composed, and filled with responsibility, exactly the qualities he had always asked of pet owners. No avoidance, no blaming, no pretending. The responses from the public, especially the deeply emotional personal stories, helped Cesar realize that his influence extended far beyond the world of animal training. He wasn't just transforming the way people saw pets. He was also changing how they looked at themselves, with more empathy, understanding, and patience. Cesar Millan's journey through crisis wasn't just a personal story. It mirrored thousands of quiet struggles within the wider community. And it was those words of encouragement and sincere empathy, even in just a few short lines, that became a kind of emotional medicine, helping him to continue his healing journey, rediscover himself, and redefine his role in life. 7. The return of a legend. After years of grappling with crisis and enduring a long, determined recovery, Cesar Millan has re-emerged not as a retouched version of his old self, but as an entirely new person, more mature, more aware, and living life on his own terms. He is no longer the man striving to keep everything under control, nor the media icon constantly racing against packed schedules, public expectations, or the spotlight. Today, Cesar enters a new chapter of his life with calmness, clear intention, and a deep trust in his intuition. Something he believes has always connected him to dogs and is now guiding him back to his truest self. In a candid interview following his treatment and reintegration, he shared, "I needed to reconnect with myself. After losing so much, I realized that the real me was still intact. No one can take that away from me unless I give it up myself." That statement marked a pivotal shift in his mindset. This comeback isn't rooted in fame, isn't about reclaiming an old status, and certainly doesn't rely on a television show to validate his identity. He's no longer striving to be the dog whisperer as a familiar brand, but is instead returning to being simply Cesar, the man behind the image, a person with his own identity, boundaries, emotions, and clearly defined values. One of the first major changes was how he organized his work. Rather than expanding large-scale training operations, Cesar chose to focus on smaller, high-quality courses held at the Dog Psychology Center in Santa Clarita, California. His central focus is no longer just about how humans train dogs, but how they live, how they feel and respond to their emotions, and how they reconnect with themselves. Perhaps the most noticeable shift is in how he relates to the public. Cesar no longer presents himself as the teacher who's always right, but as a storyteller, one who shares his stumbles, failures, lessons, and healing journey. He openly discusses his personal experiences, the need for medication. The emptiness that followed shows the loneliness in hotel rooms after long days of training, and even the tearful conversations with his daughter as they worked to rebuild their bond. Beyond teaching, he has also introduced new programs like Better Human, Better Dog, which go beyond just training pets and delve into the relationship between human emotional states and dog behavior. Through this show, he emphasizes that a dog's behavior is often a direct reflection of its environment, especially the energy and emotional stability of its owner. In his sessions, he dedicates significant time to discussing personal responsibility, consistency setting, healthy boundaries, and establishing a stable presence in daily life. Participants don't just learn how to correct their pet's behaviors. They are encouraged to observe themselves, their breathing, their responses to stress, and how they handle negative emotions. Cesar Millan. The man once capable of controlling even the most aggressive dogs also had to learn how to manage the pain within his own soul. Once a global symbol of inspiration, he now stands as living proof of a simple truth. Even the strongest people can fall, and they too deserve to heal. His story prompts us to reflect not just on the limits of success, but also reminds us that true strength doesn't lie in never falling. It lies in the ability to rise again, carrying our wounds and moving forward. If you've ever seen yourself in that journey with pain loss or moments of self-doubt, know this: the light can always be found again. What are your thoughts on Cesar Millan's journey? Share them in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss our next inspiring story. Thank you for being here. We'll see you on the next journey.